I'm under my desk. I'm doing Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger, but I'm hiding from all the other colors. So, I gotta be careful. Shh. We don't want no colors here. This is a pretty stupid bit, wasn't it?
What do it do? Well, Ulamog is scary, and that's about the point of the deck. Big, mean, scary things as fast as we can. Once Ulamog is out, it's going to be extraordinarily hard to deal with for our opponents, and then we'll just swoop in for the win by exiling tons of cards and dealing tons of damage. Key lands. Now, I usually don't mention lands in my videos, but for this deck, this is very key to making the deck run as fast as possible. If you don't have fast lands, Ulamog isn't coming out anytime in the near future, and you'll probably be pretty bored for most of the game. Guildless Commons. This is the colorless version of Is It Boilerworks, Rakdos Carnarium, and all those lands. Return a land to your hand upon entry, but it taps for 2 colorless mana. Off to a great start with the extra mana. Just not like turn 1 or 2. Temple of the False God, Eldrazi Shrine, and Shrine of the Forsaken Gods. The latter of these are the best Eldrazi lands ever, and Temple of the False God is usually pretty good, just not early in the game. But all of them will help us cast our colorless monstrosities by adding 2 colorless mana. Myriad Landscape and Terrain Generator. Myriad Landscape helps us search for basic wastes, more on them later, and Terrain Generator is just the best for this deck. It's a mana ramp on a land, and it can consistently get our lands into play as long as our hand has a land in it. It's super great here and with other non-rampy colors. White. Cloud Post and Glimmer Post. If both of these are out, they'll both tap for 2 colorless mana. And if not, well, they'll still tap for at least 1, and Glimmer Post gains us a whopping 1 life when it enters. Huzzah! Urza's Tower, Urza's Power Plant, and Urza's Mine. These are similar to the Locust lands, where if you control all 3 of them, they'll all tap for 2 mana, except in the case of Urza's Tower, which taps for 3. That's 7 mana on 3 lands if you control them all. Unlikely, but hey, it's fun to hope. Ruins of Oran Reef and Spawning Bed. Both add a colorless and have an added benefit. Ruins of Oran Reef can buff our creatures if we'd like it to, and Spawning Bed can be sacrificed to make 3 Eldrazi Scions that all sacrifice to add 1 colorless mana. Just an extra thing if you really need to net some mana and or creatures. Mirror Pool and Sanctum of Ugin. These both sack to do incredible things. Mirror Pool can sack to copy an instant or sorcery spell we control, or copy one of our Eldrazi's for 5 mana. Hello, Desolation Twin. Sanctum of Ugin's sack ability is a May ability and will let us tutor an Eldrazi to our hand. Great way to get our big creatures out. And lastly, we have our basic wastes. A lot of people don't like these because they're not really that great, because there are a ton of land that don't tap for any colored mana, and they do better than these. But to me, I think they're the coolest basic lands out there, and I absolutely love them. I've loved them ever since they came out in Oath of the Gatewatch, plus these are the only lands we can put out with Terrain Generator, and there's a couple other cards later that will be helped with this. Large Ramp. We want large quantities of ramp for mostly cheap, and this section will take us through how to achieve a very fast Ulamog. Soul Ring. Fast, colorless mana. Done. Mind Stone and Fractured Power Stone. 2 cost, 1 mana ramp rocks. Mind Stone sacks to draw a card, and Fractured Power Stone's second ability is almost 100% worthless unless you so happen to be playing Plane Chase Commander. But let's just say it's worthless. Taps for our extra 1 mana. Unstable Obelisk and Worn Power Stone. Both tap for colorless mana, 2 in the case of Worn Power Stone, and Unstable Obelisk also cancels one of our removal spells if need be. Wildfield Scarecrow and Solemn Simulacrum. Both search for 1 or 2 lands, and Sad Robot draws us a card when it dies. Hadron Archive and Dreamstone Hadron. Tap to add half of what you pay. Does that make sense? Sure. 2 or 3 mana respectively, and 2 or 3 cards respectively if you pay and sacrifice them. Warden of Geometries and Kozilek's Channeler. Eldrazi Ramp. We always need more Eldrazi, and 1 or 2 mana is what they tap for respectively. Eldrazi Horde. What's our Eldrazi commander without a few Eldrazi minions? This is a very diverse selection of creatures, so I'm mostly going off of mana cost when organizing these. I'll try and explain them one by one, so let's start. Endless One. Make this one as big as you see fit. Early or late. And Eldrazi Mimic. Change its power and toughness to whatever just entered. This can be very handy and broken. Matter Reshaper. Upon death, reveal the top card of your library and put it onto the battlefield if it costs 3 or less. Otherwise, throw that sucker into your hand. Free card, essentially. And Eternal Scourge. Cast it from exile. That's insane. Only a handful of cards do that, by the way. And I have a video about it right here. Walker of the Wastes. Here's another reason I run Wastes in this deck. The more you have, the larger this dude is, and it can potentially be pretty darn big. Kozilek's Pathfinder. That thing over there, yeah, I can pay 1 colorless mana to make that unable to block this. And Endbringer. Untaps every turn, can deal direct damage, can straight up pacify something, and can draw a card. This is extremely handy, and can you believe this is colorless? Ulamog's Death Spoiler. Upon entry, remove an opponent's exiled cards into the graveyard, and put 4 counters on it, if you can. And a 9/9 for 6 mana ain't half bad. And then we got Conduit of Ruin. This is a wonderful card, and it tutors for a very large thing and puts it on top of our library. Then it helps us cast our first creature spell each turn. Super duper nifty. And then we got Oblivion Sower, my favorite Eldrazi, and the introduction dual deck I started playing the game with. This can be very, very good and has the potential of grabbing a whole bunch of lands from an opponent's exile pile. Especially if you tagged them with Ulamog at some point. It's so cool. Not the stupid normal art that looks like a freaking Gumby doll, but the actual good alternate art that instills fear into you. Just look how gorgeous this is. I love it. Ruin Processor. Same trick as before, move something from exile into grave and gain 5 life. Bane of Bala Ged, a 7/5 with essentially Annihilator 2. Deceiver of Form. This does a similar thing to Eldrazi Mimic, but copies all of our Eldrazi until end of turn. And if we don't, at least we can scry it away. Eldrazi Devastator, an 8/9 with Trample. Very, very scary. Breaker of Armies, a 10/8 that makes all creatures have to block it, letting our other threats free to deal damage. And Ulamog's Crusher, an 8/8 with Annihilator 2, and it always attacks. That's super scary. Desolation Twin. 2 10/10s for 10 mana. Oh boy. But this guy's been reprinted so many times, I feel like it's no longer just a twin. Does that make sense? And we got Spawnsire Ulamog, a 7/11 with Annihilator 1, and it can make a whole bunch of little Eldrazi spawns that add mana. And the last ability is 1000% worthless in Commander, but it still feels scary, especially for new players. Artesian of Kozilek is a 10/9 with Annihilator 2 and returns one of our creatures from the grave to the battlefield. This ain't good for people, especially when you return that Desolation Twin to the battlefield after a board wipe. Suddenly, 3 creatures with power 10 looks like a bit much, don't you think? It That Betrays. This thing is super freaky looking. The art is incredible and I love it. 11/11 with Annihilator 2 and all other sacrifice permanents now get sacked and then enter under your control. No one likes playing against this. It can be a game ender. Whew, that was a lot. Finally, to the next section. Eldrazi Help. Since Eldrazi are a bit slower of a tribe by nature, I'd like to help them as much as I can. This is a bit mixed here at what things in this section can do, but it'll make sense here in a minute. Crashing Drawbridge. Simply give all our big boys haste for 2 mana. This is such a good card, and it literally fits in any deck. It is way underused in my opinion. Mirror of the Forebears and Mimic Vat. These 2 will help copy our large creatures and keep doing it each turn. This could be extremely useful for keeping our Eldrazi swinging. Maelstrom Colossus. Yeah, I know. It's not an Eldrazi, but it is a potential Eldrazi with Cascade. Or literally anything else in the deck that helps us, because everything in the deck will help us. Plus, this is a 7/7 body, and that never hurt anyone. Except our opponents? Okay, let's continue. Some extra help. Here are a couple extra things to help us cast our Eldrazi. Mystic Forge. This helps by basically pseudo-scrying our deck and adding an extra card to our hand, letting us cast our colorless things off the top of our library. Ugin the Ineffable. This Ugin is basically only used for the extra 2 mana off of our colorless spells, but it also has the added benefit of making a creature, putting things into our hands, and destroying something else. Forsaken Monument. This does so much for our Eldrazi. I'm so glad Wizards acknowledged the Eldrazi in Zendikar Rising, and this is such a great fit. It's an anthem, it's double colorless mana, and it's life gain. What's not to love for the Eldrazi player? Plus, the art is just incredible. On to our next section, Protect the Horde. We need ways to keep our super expensive things out. And here's a couple ways to do that. We got Lightning Greaves. Classic, doesn't need much explaining. Hasten Shroud is always amazing, especially for Ulamog. Warping Whale. And Warping Whale is pretty versatile, letting us choose what we need at pretty much any point in the game. Exile something small at the beginning of the game, counter a board wipe in the middle of the game, or just making us some good old mana ramp whenever we need. Short story, I looked through literally every card in my collection to find this stupid card, and I could not for the life of me find it, so I got mad and just ordered it online. It was so annoying. Anyway, back to the video. Not of This World. This is the Eldrazi counterspell. Any Eldrazi deck should have it. Most of the time, it'll be free, because Eldrazi's are usually very big, and this one protects Ulamog so well. Soul of New Phyrexia. This is colorless, and can make all our permanents indestructible for a turn, even from beyond the grave. I freaking love this card. Best soul in my opinion. Card draw. Now, nothing in colorless is all that great at drawing cards usually, so I've thrown out just a whole bunch of low-cost things that really just get us that extra card, and we really need that extra card draw for such big spells. Introduction to Prophecy, a new one as of the recording of this video. Scry 2 and draw a card. Nice one for colorless. Alchemist's Vial, Spare Supplies, Golden Egg, and Sky Scanner. All of these enter and draw us a card. And that's really all we need to worry about here. Although a couple of these do an extra thing, but all we're really concerned about is the card draw. Lore Seeker Stone, Mazemind Tome. Some artifacts that help us draw cards, and they each have a cost, but draw some cards. Not bad for colorless. Seer Sundial, Landfall, pay 2, and draw a card. This can really help out in a pinch. Sandstone Oracle. This is honestly my favorite card draw spell in the deck, because someone almost always has more cards in their hand than you do in a 4-player commander game. So this one really makes up for the difference in lack of cards, especially later in the game when you can cast this. Remove. Yes, just remove. Just wipe everything off the face of the planet with these creatures. We need to be the only threat, right? Let's eliminate the other ones. Titan's Presence, Introduction to Annihilation, and Scour from Existence. These all just exile a thing, and there may be a couple drawbacks, but hey, for colorless, that's pretty great. Plus, they exile, which is just on theme for Eldrazi, and really gets rid of stuff. Unless we move it back to the graveyard, okay, that's a different story. Gruesome Slaughter. This makes all of our creatures tap to deal damage to other creatures. I indeed want my 10/10s to tap to deal 10 damage. Yes, sir. Universal Solvent, Meteor Golem, and Spine of Ishsa. All destroy a permanent, and 7 seems to be the normal cost to do that, it would seem, at least in colorless. Wipe them. Now, there aren't many colorless board wipes, but here are a few of them. Nevinriel's Disc and All Is Dust. Both wipe the board. What more could you want? Niv's Disc is something you can hold over people's heads too, and that's always fun, right? And All Is Dust is just a colorless board wipe and makes sure that all of our colorless things stay out, hurting everyone else but ourselves, making for an easy, win probably. Ugin the Spirit Dragon. Anybody on MTG Arena knows the only use for Ugin is to wipe the board, and that's about it. Who knows if he'll ever be in ulting range, but you can at least wipe the board at least once, right? Without, having that big old target on his head, because everybody hates him. And just 2 extras. These didn't fit anywhere else, so they get their own section. This is also a great section to swap a couple of cards if you're not thrilled with these 2. Spatial Contortion. This is just a nice little buff or kill spell depending on what you're targeting. It's always nice to have at least one combat trick, right? Plus it's colorless, which always makes it fun. Soul Guide Lantern. This is a deceivingly powerful card. It exiles something from a graveyard upon entry, can exile all our opponent's graveyards, and with one fell swoop, Muldrotha decks are done for. Or, if no one really plays from the graveyard, it's especially useful for drawing an extra card. Very versatile for 1 extra mana. I love this deck. There are many people that do not like this deck because they hate Eldrazi, and I can understand why. I don't play it that often, but
the Eldrazi's were like my introduction to Magic, so I'm very, very fond of them, and I just think they're super awesome, super cool. The lore is awesome. Yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, follow me on TikTok, and follow me on social media. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, and yeah, let me know what you're thinking. All your support helps, so yeah, thank you so much. We'll see you guys next week.